האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening. Dobro V'Yetcher. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Noach. We're going to do Os Ches, section number 8. And before we begin, we're going to take a look at a pasuk from the Parsha that the Zera Shimshon is going to start with. Here's the pasuk. This is Parak Yud Aleph, pasuk Aleph. It is taken from the pasuk actually that introduces the story of the Dor Haflaga, the generation that was dispersed, or as they're often called, the generation of the Tower of Babel. So the pasuk says, "Vayihi chol haaretz safa echos," and all of the land was one language. They had one language that everyone spoke. Udivorim achadim, and unified words, or some people translate that as a common purpose. So that's the pasuk, that everybody basically was unified, and they could speak the same language. And instead of that being used for good, imagine how good it could be if everyone spoke the same language and had a unified purpose. It turned into people doing bad things. So let's get right into the Zera Shimshon again. Parshas Noach, Os Ches, section 8. Midrash, the Midrash Rabbah quotes the pasuk that we just looked at. Vayehi chol haaretz safa echos udvarim achadim, and all of the land had one language and unified words. She'amru devarim chadim al Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad. So the Medrash focuses on this expression of devarim achadim, really focusing on the word achadim. And it starts by saying achadim is connected to chadim. Chad means sharp. So the Torah is telling us that they had sharp words against Hashem, our God, Hashem Echad, the one God. So the word achadim, alludes to both chadim, sharp words, and also words against Hashem, who is the one God. And in addition to that, V'al echad haya Avraham ba'aretz, and also against Avram Avinu, who is called one in the land. That's based on a pasuk in Yecheskel where it says Avraham was one, and then it talks about that he was given the land of Eretz Canaan. So now we can understand that the Medrash is telling us really three things, all based on the word achadim, that the people of that time, the Dor Haflaga, the generation of the dispersal, used sharp words from chadim, chad, and they used them against two entities that were referred to as echad, as one, against Hashem, who of course is referred to as Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad, and against Avraham, who is referred to as echad. So that's who the people were clamoring against. And the Medrash continues, Amru, they said, Avraham pirda akara ve'eno molid. Avraham is like a barren mule. A mule is a very, very useful animal to have, but it cannot reproduce. So Avraham is like that. Avraham is like a barren mule, the Eino Molid, and he can't reproduce. He's unable to procreate. He's unable to have children. V'al Hashem Amru, and against Hashem they said, Lo kol heimenu sheyavor lo es ha'elyonim. It should not be all up to him, meaning to Hashem, that he should choose the Elyonim, the heavenly spheres, the supernal realms, the heavenly realms. They were disturbed by the fact, and they argued against the fact that human beings were relegated, so to speak, down to the earth, and Hashem arrogated to himself, or took it for himself to have control of the Shamayim. That's how they saw things. We're down here on earth, and Hashem gets to run things up in Shamayim, and people can't have no power, have no ability to be up in the heavenly realms, and that's not fair. They were upset about that. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Medrash Rabbah. So the Zera Shimshon comments, V'hu tamua, This statement in the Medrash Rabbah is hard to understand, and he's going to ask two questions. Ma hayisa kavonosam, what was their intention? Bakesher hazeh, in this connection that they made, lomar, to say, me Hashem ve'af me Avraham yachad. What were they thinking when they said, we have problems both with God and with Avraham? What did that mean? What did they have in mind when they did that? In other words, if they were upset with Avraham, okay, Avraham's a human being. Go, if you wanted to, I guess, if they wanted to, they could attack Avraham. And if they had a problem with Hashem, should be a very different type of problem. Why were they putting together in their minds that they were upset with both Avram and Hashem? What's the kesher? What's the connection in their minds? What was the connection in their minds, the people of the Dor HaFlaga, between their complaints against Avram and their complaints against Hashem? One would think that those are two totally different things. Ve'od, and another question, Mahu zeh she'amru Avraham pirda akara. What did they have in mind? What did they really mean when they referred to Avraham as a barren mule? Meaning, okay, there are people in the world who are blessed with the ability to have children. There are other people in the world who they aren't blessed to have children. They can't have children. Is that a reason to be angry with Avram? Is that a reason to be upset with Avram? What was their point when they said Avraham is barren and can't procreate and can't reproduce, can't bring children into the world? What was their point? Why did that bother them, and of what significance? Why was that of great significance to them? So those are the two questions that the Zera Shimshon asks on this little excerpt from the Medrash Rabbah. And now he's going to begin, as is his style, to introduce some ideas and some Gemaras and sources to help us come back and understand this piece in the Medrash Rabbah in a better and deeper way. Next paragraph. The Isa b'perak Yud Aleph to Sanhedrin. It states in the 11th chapter of Maseches Sanhedrin, Nechleku lishlosha kitos. The Gemara over there says that the people of the Dor HaFlaga, of the door of the building the tower, and the door of ultimately of the dispersal, divided themselves up into three groups. Now, the Zera Shimshon is not going to talk about all three of the groups, so let me digress for a moment to tell you about the three groups, and then you'll see the Zera Shimshon is really only focused on, he's going to mention two of the three, and he's only really focused on one of the three. But just so we're all on the same page, the Gemara says the three groups that they divided themselves up to and into when they were building this great giant tower, the three groups, each group had a different motivation. So one group's motivation was, let's build a tower to reside there. Let's live in this tower, and all of us will be in this tower, and we'll have power, and we'll be unified, and that's what they wanted to do. We won't get all spread out throughout the lands and throughout the world. We'll be together. That was one group's intention. A second group's intention was to fight against Hashem. Let's build this tower and fight against Hashem. And the third group wanted to build a tower in order to worship idols in the tower. Let's build a tower that's really tall and beautiful, and that will be a special place to do avodah zarah, to worship idols there. And perhaps they thought, as they get closer to the heavenly bodies that they might want to worship, then building a tower would put them in closer proximity to these heavenly bodies, stars, planets, things that they wanted to worship and do their avodah zarah. So those were the three groups. They were unified in building the tower, but they had three different groups with three different motivations as to why they wanted to build the tower. Now let's go back into the words of the Zera Shimshon. Nechleku l'shlosha kitos. They divided into three groups. Achas, group number one, Omeres said, Na'ale v'chule. Let's go up, etc. And that's the first group that said, let's go up and reside in the tower. Va'achas omeres na'ale v'na'aseh milchama. And one group, the second group, said, let's go up into the tower and make a war against Hashem. And the Zera Shimshon doesn't talk about the third group. Zo she'omeres v'chule, the first group who said we want to go reside in the tower, hafitzam Hashem. Hashem ended up dispersing them all around because they wanted to live together in one place, and their intentions were not for the good, and therefore Hashem dispersed them and spread them out and didn't allow them to live in one place. V'zo she'omeres na'ale v'na'asa milchama. And the second group that said, let us go up into this tower and make a war against Hashem, na'asu kofin shedin velilin. They were turned into monkeys or apes and demons and then other kinds of demons. Shedin and lilin are both different types of demons. Ad Khan until here is a quote from the Gemara in Sanhedrin. So in case you're wondering, what about the third group that wanted to go up and worship Avodah Zarah? So the Gemara says their punishment was to have their languages mixed up, and so they no longer spoke the same language, and different people spoke different languages, and that's the beginning of the different languages that is a reality since then in the world, that people don't all speak one language. And so that was the punishment based on for the people who wanted to go up and worship Avodah Zarah. But let's continue. V'yesh ledaktek. We need to analyze the ma inyan shenasu kofin v'chule. What is the connection between this punishment of being turned into monkeys and demons, imashe ratzu lasos milchama, with the fact that they wanted to make a war against Hashem? How is that connected, right? There might be lots of reasons to turn a certain individual or a group of people into monkeys, or demons for that matter, but is that really an appropriate punishment for people? Why, I should say, is that an appropriate punishment for people who wanted to build this tower to make a war against Hashem? Zera Shimshon said, what's the connection? There's no obvious connection between the punishment and the crime. And of course, we always look for a connection, a rational, logical connection between the punishment and the crime. So we might view that as our third question that ultimately we're going to need to circle back and answer. The two original questions on the Medrash Rabbah piece itself that we saw in the first paragraph, and now this new question based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin. So let's continue. Next column, next paragraph, top of the next column. V'seretz harav bal yefei toar. This question about the punishment of being turned into apes and demons was answered by the author of a sefer called Yefei Toar. Shehakat she'omru na'asa milchama. The group that said, we want to build a tower to make a war against God, hoyu choshvim lohorid shefa alehem behechreach. Their real deal, their real intention was to bring down by force the blessings from Shamayim. They were going to go up, build a tower that would go up towards Shamayim, and then they were going to compel God and the heavenly beings to bring down blessings upon them. Miteva melechas hashamayim, from the nature of the structure or the work of the Shamayim, al yedei hachonosehem, through their preparations. In other words, they thought that they had methods that they could use. If they could just get closer to Shamayim, they thought that they had methods that they could use to open up Shamayim, so to speak, open up the heavens and let the blessings come down from Shamayim, and against the will, without having to pray for it or ask Hashem for it, without having to concern themselves with anything. They thought they could do it by force. They're going to storm the heavens, so to speak, and use their special powers that they thought they had to get heavenly blessings to come down upon them, and wouldn't be too worried about what Hashem thought about this. And because of this, the Yefei Toar says, because of this, their punishment makes sense, that they were turned into monkeys and demons. Shehem mitzuim chasrei hayetzira. When we talk about apes and demons, they are missing in their creation. What does that mean? That means that apes resemble human beings. They have certain similarities to people, to humans, but they are deficient. They lack many things, many qualities and abilities, capacities that would make them truly comparable to human beings. And so too with demons, you might think you can compare a demon to a malach, but that's not true. They are not actually fully developed in the same way that malachim are. So this was a good punishment for them. V'lo yacholu lahashmim atzmam liyos b'derech ha'anoshim, and they are not able to complete themselves in the way that human beings are. Human beings can grow and develop, but apes and demons are not able to do that. And certainly, once these people were turned into monkeys and demons, then they certainly didn't have any kind of ability that they could aspire to force the heavens to open up and bring down blessings upon them. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Yefei Toar. Next paragraph. V'korov leperusho hayanir lomar. Zera Shimshon says, I'd like to suggest something that is similar to what the Yefei Toar said. So he's going to base his explanation that he's going to start developing now on the Yefei Toar, but not exactly what the Yefei Toar said, but he's going to use it as a basis. It's going to be similar to what the Yefei Toar said. Shekavonosam hayisa, that this generation, the generation of dispersal, their real intention was lahavi alehem shefa v'tova, to bring upon themselves the flow of blessings and goodness, bechishufehem, through their sorcery, behechreach, against the will of Hashem. So the Zera Shimshon says, let's take the basic idea, but let's introduce or add to it the concept of kishuf, of sorcery. These people were skilled in using kishuf, in using sorcery, and that was essential for their plan. They were going to build a tower. From the tower, they were going to use their sorcery, and they thought that their sorcery would be able to, so to speak, break into the blessings of Shemayim against Hashem's will and force the heavens to open up and release the shefa of blessings, the flow of blessings down upon them. So that's why it was an attack, so to speak, against Hashem. They're going to break into Hashem's storehouse against Hashem's will through their kishuv, through their sorcery. Afilu neged ritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though this would be against the will of Hashem. In other words, they were not interested in davening to Hashem and creating a relationship to become closer to Hashem and then asking Hashem for blessings. No, they wanted to seize the blessings by force against the will of Hashem through their kishuv, through their sorcery. The Beperakama de Chulin, in the first chapter of Meseches Chulin, Amrinon, we say, Ein od milvado. The Gemara there quotes the pasuk, Ein od milvado. There is nothing else besides Hashem. Afilu kishofim. And the Gemara says, what does it mean? There's nothing else? Well, there's nothing else. There's no other powers in the world. Even the power of sorcery is not outside the control of Hashem. People might think it is. A person might think, as did this generation of the Dor Haflaga, think that they could use kishuv to go against the will of Hashem. But the Gemara says in Meseches Chulin, no, there is no such thing as an independent force in the world. Even sorcery, however powerful it might be, it cannot be used to go against the Ratzon of Hashem. And the Gemara illustrates this. Hahi isisa de havas komehadra. There was a woman who was going around lemishkal afra to gather some dirt or dust, mitute, from underneath kare de Rabbi Chanina, from under the feet of Rabbi Chanina. So apparently there was a type of kishuf, a type of sorcerer belief that if you gathered the dirt from under the feet of a person with a certain way and perhaps with certain incantations, then you could bring about damage to that person and perhaps even bring about their death. So this woman wanted to do this, in fact, to Rabbi Chanina, gather the dirt from under Rabbi Hanina's feet and use it to put a hex on him, to do something to damage him. Omar lo. So Rabbi Hanina said to her, right? It's probably likely that he noticed that there was a woman following around trying to be unobtrusive, but trying to get dirt where he stepped. And so he said to her, Shekule, take the dirt. Lo mistayo milsich. It's not going to help your matter, your goal. You're not going to be able to accomplish your goal. You're not going to be successful, but far be it for me to try and stop you from getting the dirt from where I'm walking. Come, take the dirt, but it's not going to help you. Continuing in the next page, top of the next page in the column on the right. Ein od milvado ksiv. And Rabbi Hanina quoted this pasuk. There is nothing in the world outside of Hashem's power. So I trust in Hashem, and I trust in Hashem to protect me. You believe in sorcery and kishuf, and that's why you're trying to get the dirt to supposedly, allegedly try and harm me. Take as much of the dirt as you want. There's nothing you can do because Hashem would not allow you to do so. But now the Gemara introduces a somewhat discordant element. The Gemara says, but wait a minute, doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Lama nikra shemam kishafim? Why is sorcery called kishafim? Why is that the word that's used? So Rabbi Yochanan explains that kishafim is actually an acronym of several words that were put together to form the word kishafim. And what are those words? Shemachechishin pamalya shelmala. They go against or they contradict the league, the power of Mala, of the heavens. So Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara seems to say that kishuf, sorcery, has the power to contradict, to go against the heavenly power, and it can do things against the Ratzon of Hashem. That's what Rabbi Yochanan seems to suggest. And if that's the case, why was Rabbi Hanina saying to this lady sorcerer, come, take the dirt, I don't mind, you can't harm me? But didn't Rabbi Yochanan teach that kishuf could possibly harm a person, even though that's not what Hashem wants? So the Gemara answers, Shiny Rabbi Hanina. Rabbi Hanina was different than normal people. Dinefish zichuse, because he had a tremendous amount of merit, and because his merit, his merit in Shemayim, his heavenly merit in front of the Bezdin Shamala was of such an extraordinary degree, it was so voluminous, therefore he didn't have to worry about this lady sorcerer. However, the Gemara implies other people, regular people, might have to worry about the power of sorcery to harm them. Ad Khan until here is a quote. So we're left at this point being somewhat unclear as to kishuf. Is it powerless because of ein od milvado, because there can be no power in the world except Hashem's power, and therefore ultimately kishuf has no power to go against the Ratzon Hashem? Or seemingly, according to Rabbi Yochanan's viewpoint, kishuf could have power unless a person has tremendous protection from Hashem because of their zechuyos, because of their many merits. Next paragraph, and now with this, having learned this and understanding more about kishuf and what the people of the generation of the dispersal were trying to do and use their sorcery, now we can go back and understand a little more about the medrash. These people wanted to make a war. Klomar, this means bechoach kishufehem. They wanted to use the power of their sorcery. Lahavi alehem shefa v'rov tova, to bring the flow of blessings and a tremendous amount of good. Af neged ritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even against the will of Hashem. That's what they wanted to do. V'lo hayu ma'aminim, and they did not believe shebizman she'eno ritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu bekach, that at a time when it is not the will of Hashem in this, meaning at a time when Hashem does not wish to grant his blessings and his goodness to people, they didn't believe afilu hakishufim ein lahem shum koach, They didn't believe that their sorcery would be powerless, kidichsiv, ein od milvado, based on the idea expressed in the pasuk, ein od milvado. So these were rejectionists. This group was the rejectionist group. They understood that there was a belief out there that sorcery was powerless to go against the will of Hashem, and that Hashem controlled everything at all times in every situation. Like the pasuk says, ein od milvado, there's no power in the world besides Hashem. They did not accept that. These people believed, no, that's not true. We are such experts in kishuf and sorcery, and our sorcery is so powerful that we can use it to break in to the heavens and force the heavens to release its blessings down upon us, even if that's not what Hashem wants. Next pasuk, next paragraph. V'hoyu miviim raya l'divreihem, and they wish to bring a proof to their words. They realized that they needed to support this idea that they would be capable of doing this. What's their proof? Shahare Avraham pirda akara. They pointed to Avraham, the great tzaddik, the person in the world who taught, the great monotheist, going around teaching everyone about one God and rejecting idolatry. And they said, look at Avraham. He's a barren mule. He cannot bring children. He's not capable of bringing children into the world. Sha'af al pi shehu tzaddik. Even though we concede he's a very righteous man. Look how righteous and what a great tzaddik he is. Unefish zichuse, and look at how many incredible merits he has. V'yirei Elokim, and he's a God-fearing individual. Nonetheless, they said, ein lo koach lehetiv lo. They said God does not have the power to do good for Avraham, meaning specifically to grant him a child. So their reason for mentioning Avraham was to illustrate their point and to say, you other people, you might think that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, and therefore we can't even use our kishuf to go against him, but you're wrong, and we'll prove it. Look at Avraham, the great tzaddik, teaching everyone about Hashem. You can't have more merits than Avraham, and you can't have a person that God would want to protect and do good for more than Avraham. And look, God is not capable of giving Avraham of having Avraham be able to bear a child and bring a child into this world. Umikol shkein, therefore, how much more so shelo yachechish hakishufim. Therefore, they said God certainly cannot defeat our sorcery. So here, the Zera Shimshon has fully articulated what it was, the thought process behind this group that wanted to wage war against Hashem. And that thought process was it was based on several factors. Number one, it was based on their belief in their power of kishuf. Number two, it was based on the fact that they thought the power of their sorcery was so strong that it could force Hashem to do things against his will, so to speak. And their proof was Avram Avinu. He was the living proof because he was barren and couldn't have children. And their thought, they deduced from that, God certainly would want Avraham to bless Avram with children, but even God can't do it. If God can't bless Avram to have children, then certainly our sorcery is going to be stronger than God's ability to hold on to all of the blessings in Shamayim. So let's go build the tower, attack God, break into Shamayim, and bring down the blessings for ourselves while Hashem watches, powerless to stop this process. That was their twisted belief system. Mishum hachi, because of this, midah keneged midah. Therefore, now we understand the midah keneged midah, the measure for measure nature of their punishment. Nasu shadin vikofin, they were turned into demons and apes, v'chulei, etc. V'asi shapir sha'amru al Hashem echad, and now it makes perfect sense that they said we want to fight against the one God. Tahainu al ein od milvado. That's what they were saying. We want to fight against the one God who everyone is claiming there's nothing except him. Well, how is he one? Because he's the only power in the universe. No, that's exactly what we don't agree with. And that's exactly the concept. God's omnipotence and God's power. That's exactly what we're going to show to be false. V'al Avraham shahaya okar. And the fact that Avraham was barren, lefisha mazolo hayokach, they argued that this was because his mazel, he was controlled by his astrological sign, his mazel, and that indicated that he had to be barren. Ve'ein lo koach chas v'sholom, and they said God forbid, did not have the power lishanos hamazal to change Avraham's mazel, to change his astrological destiny. And so they were ready to go because of this very elaborate and well-developed thought process, this ideology, you might say, of why they thought they could successfully fight a battle against Hashem and bring down all the blessings upon themselves against Hashem's will. Very well thought out and developed, obviously completely erroneous. Next paragraph. Omnom, however, kedei ledaktek loshon divorim chadim. Zera Shimshon could stop at this point, but he wants to go further into understanding in a deeper way the expression of divorim chadim, sharp words that the Medrash used based on the pasuk about divorim achadim. He wants to go deeper into that concept. Umahem elu divorim chadim. What really were these sharp words? So this is going to be an additional explanation to this idea of the people using sharp words against Hashem and against Avraham. Yesh lomar, we can say, the besava di mishpatim, top of the next column. In the Zohar on Parshas Mishpatim Ka'omar, it says, De'el acher is Toras. In the Zohar, it states that when we talk about the other gods and what that means is, in this world, the forces of impurity, some people look to the kochos atuma, to the forces of impurity, and they view that as if, God forbid, as if that's another God. That's a different God. There's God, and then there's the power of impurity, the koach atuma, and that's what they call a different God. But the Zohar says, istores, it is barren. The lo ovid pirin, and it cannot produce fruit. The kochos hatuma, which we sometimes call the klipos, the shells in Kabbalistic terminology, and I always say, and will repeat now, I know nothing about the Kabbalah, but just from learning in the Zera Shimshon, we can see he uses this term klipos to refer to the kochos hatuma, the powers of impurity in the world. So they cannot bear fruit. They may be powerful in certain circumstances, but they cannot reproduce, they cannot procreate. V'ayin perusho b'sefer Adam Yoshar b'drush haklipos. You can see more about an explanation of this in the sefer Adam Yoshar in his explanation of the klipos. Ve'al zeh pirshu lanu hamikubalim. On this idea, the Kabbalists explain to us, lo yiyeh v'cho okar v'akora. There's a pasuk in the Torah that says there will not be among you a barren man and an infertile woman. So the Kabbalists and Mekubalim explain, what is that pasuk teaching? The hainu hazochar v'hanekeva shel haklipa. The male force, impure force, and the female aspect of this impure force of that we call the klipa, lo yihiu lahara lecha, will not have the power to harm you. Shegam hi nikres ela noiveles aleha, because it too is referred to by the words in a pasuk in Yeshaya as an elm tree with withered leaves. So the klipa, the koach hatum in the world, even though it might be very powerful in certain situations, is like a tree with withered leaves. It's barren. It can't reproduce. It cannot produce fruit or offspring of any kind. Next paragraph. And this shows the evil of their intention. We're about to see how incredibly twisted and evil was their and corrupt was their intention, even more than what the Zera Shimshon has explained previously. Lomar, to say, Atem omrim ki el acher istare stilo avid pirin. you people, the good people in the world, you say that the kochos atuma, the impure forces, are barren and can't produce fruit. Vehem hayu omrim chas v'sholom, but they used to say adarabba, just the opposite. They used to say that it is the impure forces that can produce fruit, and it's the so-called good forces that are barren. V'haraya, and the proof that they brought was she'Avraham pir da'akara. Avraham was seemingly sterile and couldn't produce a child. V'hu tzadik echad ba'olam, and he was a uniquely righteous person in the world. V'im kain, and if so, hatuma para v'rava. They concluded that it must be the impure forces that can procreate and be fruitful and multiply, the lo hakedusha, and not the power of holiness in the world, chas v'sholem, God forbid. V'zehu devarim chadim, and this is really on a deeper level what was meant, on a Kabbalistic level what was meant in the Medrash when it said they use sharp words, shahayu be'emes chadim. These are truly sharp words, to take to not just believe in impure forces, but to believe that it's only the impure forces which have power in the world and can procreate and grow, and not the kochos ha-kedusha, and not the pure and holy forces in the world represented by Avram Avinu, to say that those forces of good and purity have no power, and to turn the reality of the world completely upside down. That's a really sharp attack, and that's what it's meant as devarim achadim. Last paragraph. V'lochein, and therefore, machmas hatam harishon, based on the first reason, she'ein lo koach neged hakishufim, meaning the first reason they thought they could defeat Hashem, which was God would have no power against their sorcery. Va'ach machmas peiro tam hasheni, and also because of their second reason, she'eno osa peros, that the powers of good in the world can't produce fruit, can't be fruitful and can't grow. Chas v'sholom, God forbid. Hayu omrim, they said, lo kol heimenu sheyover lo ha'elyonim. It is not right that Hashem chose for himself the shamayim, the heavenly worlds, and relegated us just to be down here on the bottom. They wanted to get a hold of all the blessings that they knew were stored in shamayim, and they didn't feel it was acceptable to them to be down here on earth. She'eno ro'oi lekach halilo v'chas. And they claimed, God forbid, that God wasn't strong enough, so to speak. He wasn't powerful enough to be the one who took over Shamayim and resided there and controlled everything from there. Umishum hachi, and because of this, mida keneged mida, their punishment was measure for measure. Nasu kofin v'shedim, they were turned into apes and demons, v'chule, etc. She'enom lo min ha'elyonim v'lo min ha'tachtonim. Apes and shedim are not truly a part of the upper world or the lower world. What does that mean? So as we said previously, demons might want to make the claim that they're similar to malachim, but they're very far from it, and they're not accepted in the upper worlds like malachim. So they don't have they can't find a place in the elyonim. And apes on this world might like to claim that they're similar to people, but that's not true. We know that apes have extreme limitations and can't be compared to all of the amazing intellectual and verbal and creativity abilities and spiritual abilities that people have. So being turned into apes and demons was a way of Hashem saying, you're going to get a punishment. You weren't satisfied to be on the earth and be people and human beings and have power on earth. You wanted to get the power of Shemayim. Now you're going to be turned into beings that are in the limbo. You won't have real power on earth where human beings control things, and you'll be apes on earth. And if you're turned into Shadim, you won't have power in Shamayim, where the Malachim, and of course Hashem, but even just the Malachim control things, and the Shadim will not be able to have comparable powers. So the Zera Shimshon has explained all of these things and developed all of these ideas to help us better understand that first piece in the Medrash Rabbah, which presented some issues and some questions, but now he has explained everything and fit everything in its place. Yashar koach for joining in the learning tonight. We look forward, God willing, to learning together again on next week's Parsha in the Zera Shimshon.